Australia is considering banning GitHub for users below 16 years old. You folks heard this news? They're considering making GitHub an adults-only website. And when I heard the news, my reaction was like this. Yes, that's what I did when I heard the news. Okay, so I'm going to give you 3 possible reasons why they could have decided to do this, and I want you to guess what the right answer is. Are you ready? Option 1, they worry that the social interaction features of GitHub might lead to minors talking to bad people and end up being groomed. Option 2, they don't want kids getting into coding because AI will possibly take over all those jobs in the next 5 years. Option 3, they're confusing GitHub for another website that ends with hub. Can you guess what the answer is? This one's really challenging, so think this through, okay? The right answer is option 1. Of course, it's option 1. In September 2025, Australia's e-safety commissioner, Julie Inman-Grant, sent letters to 16 tech companies, not just the obvious suspects like Facebook and Instagram, but companies like GitHub, Discord, Reddit, Steam, Twitch. The commissioner's office has been researching about 100 different platforms, and they're asking each company to self-assess whether they meet the legal definition of social media. So they're asking a bunch of services, are you social media? Does your service meet the legal definition of social media? So you might be wondering, why is this? Why does it matter whether they're legally labeled as social media or not? You see, back in November 2024, the Australian Parliament passed something called the Online Safety Amendment Act. This law mandates that any platform classified as social media must take reasonable steps to prevent anyone under the age of 16 from creating an account or maintaining an account. Usually this is true in most countries, but it's under the age of like 13, right? Younger kids. But for Australia, this law says anyone under 16, okay? And what's the consequence if they don't comply? A fine of up to $50 million. So basically, in Australia, anyone under the age of 16 is not supposed to create an account, not supposed to be able to create an account on a social media website. And any company that's classified as social media needs to take reasonable steps to prevent that from happening. And if not, they got to pay the fine. So basically, this requires some obvious social media companies like Facebook or Instagram to take steps to prevent anyone under 16 from creating or maintaining an account. Fine. According to the law, it says reasonable steps. That could mean anything like, age verification. Fine. Facebook and Twitter are obviously social media. They're going to do it. But what about some other services where it isn't obvious if they are social media or not? How do you define social media? I think I know what social media is, but if you ask me to define it or have a clear checklist of things that make a service social media, I'm not sure I can do it. But they've given it a shot. So according to the legislation, your social media, if you tick 3 boxes. First, your primary purpose involves social interaction. Second, users can link or interact with other users. And third, users can post material. Now think about that for a second. What about GitHub? It's a code collaboration platform. Users can interact through pull request and issues, right? You can make a post using a pull request. Someone else can comment on it. Similarly for issues. What about Stack Overflow? Users can interact through questions and answers, right? Discord, obviously social. Slack, obviously social. What about something like Notion with its collaboration features? Well, that could be social media, right? What about Figma, where designers comment on each other's work? That could be social media. Forget all that. Google Docs, where you can leave comments on other docs. Well, technically that fits, right? So technically any of these platforms could lead to young kids possibly interacting with who knows who else on the internet, with all of the associated risks that come from kids interacting with strangers online. So this law was written to catch Facebook and TikTok, but the net that they ended up casting is catching literally all other collaboration tools that are available online. So let me ask you this. Should 15-year-old Australians not access Google Docs? The craziest thing is that this e-safety office isn't actually declaring whether a site is social media or not, whether something is in or out, right? So they are not declaring GitHub is out yet. They're essentially saying, well, here are the guidelines. You figure it out yourself. And if you guess it wrong, we will fine you. As Commissioner Grant put it, If companies believe their platforms should be exempt from the ban when it comes into effect in December, they have been told to make their case in writing and provide evidence as to why. There are some that are pretty clear, but we still have to give them the due diligence process. E-Safety Commissioner Julie Inman-Grant said, we need to hear them all out. So GitHub, along with like 15 other platforms like WhatsApp, Roblox, Reddit, Discord, they've all received what's basically a homework assignment, right? Use our self-assessment tool, check if you have social media features, and if you think you're exempt, you better have a really good lawyer write that explanation. And if you aren't exempt, well, it's a regulatory requirement, so you have to implement reasonable steps to verify ages and keep under 16s out. Now, what counts as reasonable? Nobody knows. The law takes into effect on December 10th, 2025, so companies are scrambling to figure it out, as you can imagine. Maybe what ends up happening is GitHub is going to start asking for government IDs. If you're signing up, you got to provide proof that you're an adult, okay? All this just to make sure that 14-year-olds don't contribute to open source projects. Wait a minute. 14-year-olds contributing to open source projects doesn't actually sound like a good idea. So maybe this is a good thing? No, it's not. Okay, forget that I said that. I'm going to edit this part out. But as you can imagine, when the word got out that GitHub might be banned for kids in Australia, the internet did what the internet does best. It lost its mind. Complete lunacy happening in Australia. The E-Safety Commissioner is investigating whether GitHub might qualify as banned social media platform for kids under 16. I guess kids wanting to learn to code will have to do so from outside Australia. I laughed so hard when I saw that. GitHub must be dangerous for kids. Because, folks, we all know the teenagers are just dying to spend their Friday nights on pull requests and code review comments on GitHub. Right? This is the most happening place for teenagers to be online, guys. There were also some conspiracy theories. My guess is that they want to restrict people from downloading open source tools and code that might be used to circumvent their censorship measures, such as VPN, encryption chats, and other freedom tech stuff. I don't know. Are the kids the only folks who are doing this stuff? Well, here's what I think. For the longest time, there's been this gap between people who write the law and people who build technology, right? Technology has always been evolving rapidly over the last 100, even 200 years. And the legal side of things is much, much slower in evolution by comparison, right? So when there is this misalignment like this, for someone who's on the law side of things, the tech side seems very opaque and obscure. And for someone who's on the tech side of things, who's caught up with technology, the law often seems ridiculous and extremely slow. Right? And this isn't the first time we've seen authorities panic about technology and completely miss the mark. All through history, there have been many of such moral panic moments. If you examine now, they look crazily out of touch, all right? Back in 2000s, all right, many schools used to ban Wikipedia because they thought it was unreliable and they thought it would encourage cheating. They thought, okay, kids are not going to do their research. They're just going to go to Wikipedia and just copy. So teachers were forbidding students from even visiting Wikipedia. Now, fast forward a few years, and guess what? Wikipedia is now like the primary starting point for any research. Okay, so banning this entire online encyclopedia because just some articles could be wrong, that was a bad idea, right? This is not even the worst of it. There was a time where some schools actually blocked Google Docs. Can you guess why? What harm could Google Docs make? Well, schools discovered that students were using Google Docs as like secret chat rooms, right? They would type messages in shared documents and then delete them. So they were basically passing digital notes using Google Docs. So the response, some school districts just banned Google Docs sharing entirely. They said, okay, this could lead to kids talking to each other and exchanging secret messages. Who knows what they're writing? So let's just ban it. And guess what happened? Kids moved on to Microsoft OneNote, or from that gets banned, they move on to something else. You get the idea. And it's not even the internet. Right? Even before the internet, there was this calculator controversy of the 1980s and the 1970s, right? I heard during that time, calculators were considered a threat to education. So authorities believed that calculators would ruin kids' mathematical abilities and they banned them completely, right? But the fear was that if kids had calculators, they wouldn't learn basic arithmetic because calculators would do the job for them. Does this sound familiar? It probably sounds familiar because I've heard that some schools, even today, ban calculators. So the pattern is always the same. New technology comes up, authorities don't understand it, so they panic and they do a blanket ban. And after a few months or years, people realized, okay, the panic was overblown, and it's the same movie playing over and over again, except each time the technology gets a little more advanced and people making the rules seem to understand it even lesser and lesser. Now, with GitHub, what makes this particular situation a little absurd is that we are talking about banning kids from accessing what's essentially the world's largest library of code and collaborative learning. It's funny because a lot of people say kids need to learn to code, right? Or well, at least they used to say that. I don't know if they still do because of with all the AI thing, it's like the perceived value in kids learning programming skills has kind of diminished a little, I guess. But anyway, you've removed this key source of kids being able to learn how to code. And honestly, I don't think kids of that age contribute a lot to big open source projects. I'm sure there are some exceptional kids. I'm sure there are prodigies who are going to create the next big open source project who are like 13 or 14. But a vast majority of them are in the learning phase, right? They would look at code, perhaps they create a small project, they publish it, and they share with their friends and family, right? That's being removed for a whole country of children because the government is worried about them being groomed. Okay, it's like, I don't know, libraries are banned because adults might write notes on the books and kids might see them. So sorry, kids, no books for you. I mean, it's like, it doesn't make any sense. I'm going to be honest with you. I have kids and I often worry about what they learn online and who they interact with online. So this is a worry that all parents have. And this is a legitimate worry. But I also think that we need to be careful about how we approach this. Online safety for kids is a serious issue that needs attention. Kids see inappropriate content online, and there are predators who exist online. Social media have problems with cyberbullying, with attention grabbing, which keeps kids scrolling for hours. There is also this anonymous or pseudonymous nature of many social platforms. It makes it very easy for bad actors to target vulnerable kids. But when you're looking at GitHub, what are the actual risks that kids face on the platform? Let's break this down. There is the toxicity issue. Developers can be brutal to each other in code reviews. Some developers, not all. Most people are professional, I would say. And I've seen grown people get depressed because of really savage code critiques, right? That happens. And that is something that you see in open source communities. Have you seen kids talking to each other on a playground? Have you seen how brutal they are? I think that we are underestimating how kids deal with this stuff, right? The developer feedback might actually be better than the feedback and the interaction that kids face with each other on playgrounds, in school classrooms. I don't think it's as much of a concern on GitHub. The other challenge is the grooming. But I think GitHub is not as big of a target as possibly other platforms where kids actually do socialize a lot, like Roblox or Discord or Instagram or TikTok. That's where kids go to have fun and not write code. So I think GitHub is less of a risk than those websites. Anyway, all those are coming under the scrutiny of this legislation. So they basically said, okay, here's a list, and they haven't really banned it yet. They're considering. So it's up to these websites and these service providers to write back and let the government know if they are social media or not and if they should do it or not. Now, I want to talk about what happens if GitHub is classified as social media. Then GitHub has to verify that every user is over 16. What does it look like? Well, that means that whenever you're registering an account, you have to provide some kind of a documented proof that you are over the age of 16. You as an adult needs to do this. So what does it entail? Maybe government ID uploads, maybe credit card verification, facial recognition. Now you've got a privacy problem. In order to prevent kids from logging into GitHub, you've basically said, now I have to store sensitive identity information for millions of users. And now what happens if GitHub gets hacked? We are basically making internet a less safe place in the name of protecting children. Is it really worth? I don't know, but there is a possibility that this could be classified as social media, in which case people who are creating accounts on GitHub might need to show proof that they are an adult. I don't know if it applies only in Australia or outside. What about if somebody is using a VPN? What if an Australian person is outside Australia and trying to create an account? It's a mess, and I have no idea how this is going to go, but I found this to be a very interesting new development and wanted to share with you folks. Let me know what you think.